given the history of this guitar, at one point it was just one of probably dozens of bodies that were sitting there that day, and this was just one of dozens of necks. They happened to come together with these exact pickups, and it happened to be the one that went to the exact dealership that happened to be sold to this guy in Italy, who then happened to play it on these massive film scores that everyone in the world has now heard. So much chance goes into all this stuff to make something special. It's just cool that it's here now, and I get to break it a little bit. Hey everybody, I am Mason Stoops, and I'm back at Hollywood Guitar Center. This time I'm with my friend Dave Maddux, who is the master repairman for all things vintage, especially valuable, ultra rare, ultra collectible. Dave is a fucking badass. I think I'm allowed to say that. And he's got a crazy history with guitars.
Well, I started at Fender in 1974. And I left in 2017. So in that time, I worked in basically all the departments. I started out in the paint department. I worked on the guitar final line. I was an amplifier inspector. I worked on the Rhodes piano line.
Oh, no way.
Yeah,
oh.
I can rebuild a Rhodes piano.
That's good to know.
You know. So if anybody needs to work on a Rhodes piano, I can do it.
And then you just kind of walked in here one day, or how'd that happen?
Well, I was in Guitar Center buying strings up in Oxnard. And they had a sign there saying, you know, they needed a repair person. So I said, hey,
I'm the most overqualified
I can do
person.
that. And I had been, you know, basically retired for 6 months. And so I said, sure, I'll come in and do repairs.
Wow.
It's funny because I sometimes get to work on guitars that I built.
Back in the day.
Back at Fender. In fact, once I've seen my name on the inspection tag where I signed it.
That's incredible. Seeing your own name inside of a guitar that you built back in the day, is that emotional? Is that strange?
It's a very satisfying experience.
Okay.
Because it leads me to believe that that guitar has created good feelings and played good music for a long time. It's awesome to see it still around and still being used.
Man, how many guitars do you think you built back when you were with Fender?
We used to have to build 40 Stratocasters a day. Literally thousands and thousands and thousands.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
40 Strats a day.
We had to do more if we were doing like basses because they have less on them. They don't have a tremolo and stuff like that. So we had to do actually more. I don't remember the numbers, but Fender's production was around 400 to 600 guitars a day.
That seems like we would have enough guitars by now.
And they're still producing those numbers today.
Crazy. And you invented the electric guitar. I always forget that. I love that you mentioned that you worked on basses faster because they didn't have a tremolo. I brought with me today a bass that does have a tremolo that I think you were there for, at least the later end of this model. But the Fender Base VI is maybe my all-time favorite product that Fender made, just because it was such a hybrid of so many ideas, so many things. It's part Stratocaster, part Jazzmaster, part bass, part Jaguar.
It's very, very unique.
Very unique, and I think often misunderstood. And it's just such a special and iconic sound. But I wanted to bring this and show this to you today and get your input and see what you maybe thought of this particular bass.
Well, yours is unique because all Base 6s that I have seen always have 4.
Right. The early one.
The only one that I've seen that only has the 3.
And it's got these.
It's got the rings. I've seen the ones with the rings around the pickups. I've seen that before.
But never the 3-way.
But never the 3 switches. They've always had the 4.
When I first got this, I felt a little sad. I was like, oh, I don't have that bass cut switch. But the story of this guitar is
necessary.
This is the Base VI that was owned by Alessandro Alessandroni, who's a very successful Italian composer and musician. And this is the Base VI that they used on a lot of the Ennio Morricone score. Exactly.
Yes.
The Dollars trilogy. And I still can't believe I was able to get it. But nonetheless, it's been proven to work.
It
recorded
plays real
well
too.
So I've let go of not having the bass switch, knowing that, well, they didn't need it to make those iconic sounds, so I don't think I need it either.
Well, one thing I did notice in comparison to the two that we have here is that it's much louder.
You think so?
Yes, the pickups have much more output.
I wonder if that's because these are the earlier ones like this kind of have they're like more Strat pickups, and the later ones have kind of like the Jaguar with the metal shield on the sides. I don't know if it's just because they're different kinds of pickups.
What we call the comb.
What was that about?
It's to change the magnetic impedance of the pickup.
Gotcha.
It adds a little bit more oomph to the treble side.
That's crazy. Just a piece of metal cut like that.
But it's lower on the bass side. It doesn't go up as high.
Really?
Yeah, if you look at it, it goes like 4 and then it goes up for the last 2.
I mean, is that Leo coming up with those ideas? Is that
Leo,
Freddie
Tavares came up. Freddie Tavares was really brilliant.
I've always heard he was a genius.
Brilliant. And
Yeah.
he came up with all kinds of stuff. And he would call companies and research stuff with them not knowing that he was researching stuff.
Really?
But he would call and get information from different companies to help improve Fender product.
Man, I wish there was a whole movie just about Freddie. I mean, his session work, the stuff he played on before he came, the Looney Tunes, the boo.
Yep.
That's Freddie.
Yes, it
the
is.
guy who helped design the Stratocaster.
Okay, something else that he did is he would show off on the factory floor. He would get down and do a one-handed push-up.
That is impressive.
At like 70 years old,
Someday I'll be 70, but I won't be able to do one-handed push-ups.
No.
All right, so this model specifically is in 1962. I believe the Bass VI was introduced right at the tail end of 61. I might be a little off on that, but this is very early in the design. We've acknowledged the 3-way switch without the bass cut and these earlier kind of Strat style pickups with the big metal surrounds. I believe it's just an alder body, maple neck, rosewood board.
Something else I noticed is look how much the contour comes in here.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
amazing.
Come on, guys.
That's beautiful.
Let's get back to this. To the people, you know who you are. No more of this. No, we want this. We want...
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
It really is.
A lot of times I'll bring it to a session and they'll be like, oh, no, we've already, we've got bass. We're good. It's like, no, I understand. You can keep that. This is, the tic-tac bass thing was so special because it would just double what a bass was already doing or come up with a complementary part. It sits in this really special frequency range where it doesn't step on the bass, but also doesn't step on guitars. And it just fills in this gap in a song that otherwise is kind of just left and abandoned. They really were onto something, and I hope more and more people appreciate how special and how unique a Bass VI.
I would like to see a revival of the instrument.
I'm working on it.
I really would, because it is a unique, special instrument, but it has never received the recognition that it deserves.
I agree. Right around the time me and Guitarcenter first started dating, I did a video for the Vintera II Fender Bass VI. And that was I think their first time really reissuing it. I mean, it was amazing. I remember...
Is it a 30-inch scale also?
Yeah, they did everything the way you hope. It had the bass cut switch. It had the later pickups. It was amazing. And you can buy one right now. If you want. You do.
The store has a couple of Bass VIs here, and I've got a red one here I'd like for you to take a look at.
So this Bass VI is a 64. This is when they switched to the kind of more Jaguar-ish looking pickups with the metal combs, and they added this fourth bass cut switch.
The bass cut switch, yes.
Which seems counterintuitive on a bass 6, but it's actually really cool because what this bass already is doing musically is kind of adding treble to what would otherwise be a dark, bassy world. So,
I just noticed it takes off a little bit of the overtones.
So what was once... Now... Oh, I went to bend my arm and it's not there. There's times in the studio that bass cut switch would come in really handy. So I'm glad it's there, and I'm glad they brought that back on the Vintera II that they've reissued.
Right.
But it does sound remarkably different than my 62.
Right.
But and not in a bad way at all, in a way that's...
No, it's a pleasant sound.
It's really nice.
It's just different.
And I think it's a slightly narrower neck too, which is maybe a little more comfortable. Yeah.
Any variation in the size of the neck would just be sanding.
Really?
Yeah, because they had standard sizes for everything.
So is that true? Because people talk about, oh, later they made it this nut length, or this, the nut width was here, or these ones have... It's basically all the stuff people obsess over. It seems more often than not, it's just based on who was doing what that day.
Set dimensions, and they didn't change, but everything gets sanded.
Right.
So things can change there.
But that's part of what makes all this stuff so special. Is they are all
one of a kind.
Yeah.
They're all unique.
You were there when they were still making bass 6s at the tail end, right?
At the very tail end of their production. What they did is they found a bunch of parts. And so they brought them out and said, okay, we're just going to run the last of the bass 6s through production. And we ran all of them, and that was it.
Do you remember setting any of them up as they were on their way out?
Oh, yeah.
Any ones in candy apple red like this, maybe?
I'm sure there were.
If we opened this up and we saw Dave's...
No, it wouldn't. My name wouldn't be in there. It would only be on the tag.
Well, we could write your name on it. Let me see. Who has the Sharpie?
Well, there's a little story. The George Harrison Telecaster?
Yeah.
The Rosewood Telecaster. It has my initials on the inside.
No way.
Yes, it does.
The one?
The one, because they sent it back because the body cracked and they had to fix it. And they sent it to me to paint.
No way.
So they said, yeah, this belongs to George Harrison. So I got out my felt marker and I put my initials inside the pickup cavity. And I painted over them with polyester.
Yeah, no one's taking
No one's taking it out.
Wow, that's incredible. So you're a Beatle too. I had no idea. That's amazing how history works. I've already gone through and taken mine apart and put it back together a bunch of times just because I love seeing inside and what's going on and who signed what. Is that something we could do with this?
Sure.
Hell yeah.
We can pull it apart.
You've put the capo on, obviously, to keep the strings from going crazy.
Yeah.
This is just how you used to do it back in the day.
Yep. You pull this off. You can see on the end of the neck, there's the date.
May 1963. Was there ever any, issue getting, neck pockets to sit exactly tight, or would you put a different neck on because you thought it maybe fit a body better?
No, we would usually sand the neck pocket to make it fit. The neck pocket was usually a little bit too tight.
Really?
And we would sand it to make it fit.
Because you don't want it to be loose.
No. You want it to be as snug as possible. In my early days there, we used a lot of shims on the sides and stuff like that.
Why was that?
Because they routed the neck pockets extra large to make sure the necks would just slide in. It was really, the CBS days were really sloppy.
And when would you say that stuff started improving again?
Well, in the early 80s, Dan Smith came on board.
Right.
And he had come from Yamaha. But Dan Smith was a guitar player. So he started making improvements right away. What he started doing was putting in measurements. Before, we just kind of went, oh, about that high,
Right.
da, 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 da. He put in actual written measurements. The bone nut has to be this high, the action has to be this high in numbers, so that everything came out
Consistent.
more consistent
Yeah.
and more exact.
When you see the date on the neck, that's not the day the guitar was assembled. That's the day the neck was assembled.
That's the day the neck was sanded.
Right.
The last guy, and just before it went into paint.
And then how long from when a neck was painted and cured before it was assembled onto a guitar generally?
Not that long, because it was a pretty much flow through operation.
Right.
You know, like a few days.
Dave, thank you so much again for making time out of your busy schedule to come hang out with me and nerd out on all this stuff.
My pleasure.
So if you ever find yourself in LA and you feel like coming to the Hollywood Guitar Center, which I highly recommend that you do, maybe you'll get to meet Dave or you'll run into our friend Alan. Either way, it's definitely worth the trip. And yeah, thanks for watching. Ba-da, ba-da. All right, cool.